a storm like no other, and a secret colder than the snow itself. When a 7-year-old girl named Lily vanishes in the heart of a blizzard, the world assumes she's another tragic victim of nature's fury. But this isn't just a survival story. It's a chilling tale of betrayal, guilt, and redemption. Miles away, a billionaire haunted by his past catches a faint, impossible signal in the storm. A flicker of life that could change everything. As the wind howls and time runs out, two strangers are pulled together by fate, one fighting to survive, the other desperate for a second chance. Will the blizzard claim another life, or expose a truth far deadlier than the cold? Stay till the end, because what happens in that storm will leave you breathless. In the winter of 2008, the modern era would see its own version of this horror. A series of blizzards struck Afghanistan, a country already hardened by conflict and poverty. Temperatures plummeted to a staggering minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit as the storms unleashed their icy wrath, burying mountain passes under 60 feet of snow and cutting off remote villages for weeks. The death toll climbed relentlessly, a testament to the storm's brutal efficiency, ultimately claiming at least 926 lives. People froze in their homes, unable to find fuel. Others were lost on roads that had simply vanished. These events are terrifying reminders of the overwhelming power of the natural world, a force that can extinguish life on a colossal scale without a shred of malice. It is simply nature's indifference, vast and absolute. But sometimes, the most terrifying danger isn't the storm raging outside with its howling winds and blinding snow. Sometimes, the biggest danger is the profound, calculated coldness lurking inside a human heart. This is the story of a little girl who came face to face with both, and the unsuspecting stranger who became her only hope in a world that had frozen over. For 7-year-old Lily, the world wasn't measured in dolls or toys, but in moments, in memories. Her most prized possessions were the sun-drenched afternoons she had spent with her father. A collection of golden hours she kept locked safely in her heart. He was a master carpenter, a man with a booming laugh that could shake the dust from the rafters and calloused, sawdust-covered hands that were always impossibly gentle with her. With those same strong, capable hands, he had built their small, sturdy home from the ground up, a fortress of love and timber nestled right at the edge of a sprawling national forest. For Lily, that forest wasn't some dark, scary place from a fairy tale. It was her backyard, a magical, limitless kingdom she and her dad explored together. He taught her the secret life of the woods. She learned the difference between the whisper of the wind in the pines and the rustle of a creature in the undergrowth. She knew the names of the trees not just by their leaves, but by the texture of their bark and the way they held the morning light. He showed her the subtle artistry of the squirrels, how they planned for winter with a frantic, focused energy. He taught her how to read the silent, intricate language of the deer. "Look, Lilybug," he'd whisper, his voice a low rumble, crouching down to point at fresh tracks in the soft, damp earth. "A fox came through here last night. See how his prints are in a straight line? He was on a mission, focused. He was in a hurry." Her dad had this way of making the entire world feel like a wonderful, shared secret, a grand adventure meant only for them. One crisp autumn afternoon, they found a baby owl that had fallen from its nest, its wing bent at an awkward angle. Her father, with a reverence Lily would never forget, gently scooped up the bird in a flannel shirt. For the next week, their workshop transformed into an avian infirmary. Her father fashioned a tiny splint from a popsicle stick and some medical tape, his large, rough fingers moving with the delicacy of a surgeon. Lily was put in charge of feeding, mashing up worms and grubs into a paste that she offered to the owlet on the end of a coffee stirrer. The little bird, which she named Blinky, slowly regained its strength. The day they released it, her father lifted her onto his shoulders so she could watch Blinky test his mended wing and finally soar back up into the canopy. "Everything deserves a chance, Lilybug," he told her, his voice thick with emotion. "No matter how small." He was her sun, her moon, and all of her stars, the fixed point around which her small universe gracefully turned. Life was simple, unadorned, but it was perfect. Their evenings were a symphony of simple comforts. They smelled of drying sawdust, fresh-cut pine, and whatever simple meal they had cooked together, Lily perched on a stool, diligently stirring a pot, as if the fate of the world depended on it. After dinner, the real magic began. The house would fill with the sound of his patient, steady voice reading stories aloud. He didn't just read the words. He gave them life. He'd trace the sentences with his finger, her little head resting on his chest, feeling the deep, comforting rumble of his voice vibrate through her. He read her tales of brave knights, clever princesses, and lost children who always found their way home. He promised her a lifetime of such adventures, of grand tree houses built high in the mightiest oaks and long, lazy summers spent fishing for minnows in the nearby creek. He promised he would always be there, a promise as solid and dependable as the house he'd built. And Lily believed him with the pure, unwavering faith that only a child can possess. She had no reason not to. In her perfect little world, built of wood and love, promises were never, ever broken. But that world, so carefully constructed, was about to be shaken to its very foundation by a shadow that would arrive with a practiced smile and a heart as cold and unforgiving as the coming winter. The shadow's name was Victoria. She didn't arrive with a thunderclap or a warning. She glided into their lives on a cloud of expensive, sweet perfume, a stark contrast to the familiar scent of sawdust and pine. She was armed with a dazzling smile that was quick to appear, but never ever managed to reach her eyes. Lily's father, a good and honest man who had been profoundly lonely since her mother passed away when Lily was just a baby, was instantly and completely captivated. To him, Victoria was a splash of vibrant color in a world that had become gray. She was beautiful, effortlessly charming, and she possessed a talent for making him feel like the most interesting man in the world, hanging on his every word with feigned fascination. She praised his intricate woodwork, calling it art, admired the sturdy simplicity of his home, and most importantly, she pretended to absolutely adore his daughter. "Oh, what a precious, precious angel you are," Victoria would coo, her voice like honey as she stroked Lily's hair with her long, perfectly manicured nails. But her touch was as cold as a river stone, and Lily would instinctively flinch, a small, barely perceptible recoil she couldn't explain. She didn't have the words for the tight knot of unease that formed in her stomach whenever Victoria was near, the feeling that she was looking at a person wearing a mask. Her father, blinded by his own desperate need for a partner to share his life with, saw none of it. He saw only a second chance at happiness, a future he hadn't dared to dream of. One afternoon, Lily tried to show Victoria the intricate birdhouse her father had just finished, a miniature replica of their own home. "Daddy made this," Lily said proudly. Victoria glanced at it, her smile tight. "That's nice, dear. Now run along, the adults are talking." Later, when her father wasn't looking, Lily saw Victoria pick up the birdhouse, her expression one of disdain, before setting it down with just enough force to crack one of the delicate, hand-carved shingles. When Lily pointed it out, her voice trembling, Victoria feigned shock. "Oh, you clumsy girl! You must have broken it." Her father, wanting to keep the peace, gently chided Lily to be more careful, leaving her heartbroken and confused. Within 6 months, they were married. The changes were subtle at first, small tremors before the earthquake. The comforting, earthy smell of sawdust was slowly but surely replaced by the cloying, ever-present scent of Victoria's perfume. The simple, hearty meals Lily and her dad had always cooked together were abandoned in favor of complicated takeout from restaurants Lily had never heard of. Her worn, beloved storybooks were tucked away on high shelves, their space on the coffee table claimed by glossy fashion magazines filled with images of a life Lily didn't recognize. Then, Lily's father got sick. It began insidiously, with a persistent cough he brushed off as a lingering cold. A deep, unshakable tiredness settled into his bones, a weariness he blamed on long hours in his workshop. But it didn't go away. It deepened. Soon the strong man with the booming laugh was confined to his bed, his voice shrinking to a frail, papery whisper. Victoria, ever the actress, played the part of the doting wife flawlessly. She was always at his bedside, a picture of concern, spoon-feeding him broth with a look of deep, practiced sorrow etched onto her face. But when she thought no one was watching, as Lily stood silently in the shadows of the doorway, the mask would slip. In those unguarded moments, Lily saw it all, the flicker of raw impatience in her eyes when her father took too long to swallow, the flash of pure, unadulterated irritation when he coughed through the night. The local doctors were baffled by his rapid, inexplicable decline. They ran tests, offered theories, but had no definitive answers. One suggested a specialist in the city, a trip for more advanced diagnostics. But Victoria was quick to dismiss it. "Oh, darling, that's so unnecessary," she'd cooed to her husband. "All that travel will only weaken you more. You just need rest. I'll take care of you right here." He, weak and trusting, agreed. Lily, overhearing from the hall, felt a cold dread. She didn't understand medicine, but she understood the forest. When a tree was sick, you didn't just look at the leaves. You checked the roots. Victoria was stopping them from checking the roots. One cold autumn evening, as the sun bled out of the sky, he called Lily to his side. His hand, the one that had held hers so tightly on their forest walks, was now thin and frighteningly weak. "Be a good girl, Lilybug," he whispered, his breath catching. "Promise me." "I promise, Daddy," she cried, her tears falling onto his hand. He managed a faint, tired smile, and then his eyes closed for the last time. The house, which had once rung with laughter and the sound of a saw, fell utterly silent. The booming laugh was gone. And in that heavy, suffocating silence, Victoria's true nature, no longer needing its mask, began to emerge from the shadows. Lily was now completely and terrifyingly alone, with a woman who looked at her not as a stepdaughter to be cared for, but as a final, inconvenient obstacle. Miles and miles away, in a glass and steel tower that scraped the clouds, Marcus Thorne stared out at the sprawling carpet of city lights below. By any worldly measure, he had it all. At 42, he had built a global tech empire from a single idea sketched on a napkin, amassing a fortune so vast it could last 10 lifetimes. His name, Thorne, was a brand in itself, a word that commanded respect and opened any door in the worlds of finance and innovation. But here, in the stark, minimalist quiet of his penthouse apartment, surrounded by priceless art and cutting-edge technology, he was painfully, crushingly alone. It was a specific kind of silence, one that had its own texture and weight. It had haunted him for 20 years, ever since the day he lost his younger sister, Chloe. She was 17, a whirlwind of life, with a reckless, vibrant spirit that he both loved and deeply feared. They were on a ski trip in the Alps, a rare break from his burgeoning career. He was a young man then, just 22, hungry and distracted. He was on the verge of securing the seed funding that would become the bedrock of his empire. The call had come through right as they were about to head down the mountain together. He had told her to wait, just wait 15 minutes, not to go down the treacherous advanced slope alone. He could still hear her laugh clear as a bell across 2 decades. "Don't be such a boring old man, Marcus. I'll meet you at the bottom. Bet I can beat your time." With a wink, she had pushed off down the mountain. He never saw her alive again. An avalanche, they called it. A freak accident of nature. But in the desolate quiet of his own mind, Marcus knew it was his fault. He had chosen the call. He had chosen the deal over his sister. He had chosen logic over instinct. The guilt was not an occasional visitor. It was a permanent resident in his soul, a constant dull ache that no amount of success could ever numb. He had built his entire empire on a foundation of that grief, working with a relentless, punishing ferocity as if he could outrun her ghost, as if he could build a tower of success so high it would shield him from the memory of the snow. He channeled his bottomless pain into quiet, strictly anonymous philanthropy. He funded women's shelters, neonatal units in underfunded hospitals, and scholarships for underprivileged students, all through a complex web of foundations and trusts that kept his name completely out of the public eye. It wasn't about recognition. It was his penance, his secret, desperate attempt to balance the cosmic scales for the one life he couldn't or didn't save. Just last week, he'd received a report. A scholarship he funded had allowed a young woman from a poor, rural background to graduate from medical school. She was now returning to her hometown to open a clinic. His assistant had called it a wonderful success story. Marcus had just stared at the report, feeling nothing. It was all just numbers, transactions. None of it brought Chloe back. Now, with winter tightening its grip on the world outside his window, he felt that familiar, restless agitation creeping back in. The anniversary of Chloe's death was near, a date on the calendar that always felt circled in black. He needed to escape the city, the meetings, the ghosts that haunted his penthouse. He owned a secluded, ultra-modern retreat, a marvel of architecture tucked deep in a remote mountain range, the very same range that bordered the sprawling national forest where Lily now lived in her silent, cold home. The house was his fortress of solitude, all sharp angles and reinforced glass, designed to withstand anything the mountain could throw at it. He informed his small, trusted staff that he was leaving for the mountains, seeking isolation and peace. He had no idea he was about to be thrust into a storm far more personal and demanding than any he had ever faced. A storm that would ask everything of him. After the sparse, quiet funeral, Victoria's transformation was as swift as it was chilling. The mask of the grieving widow was not just removed, it was smashed. Her first move was to cruelly and unceremoniously fire the kindly, aging housekeeper, a woman who had worked for Lily's father for years and had been a warm, grandmotherly presence in the little girl's life. "Your services are no longer required," Victoria had said, pressing a final check into the woman's hand and closing the door before she could even say a proper goodbye to Lily. Just like that, with a few cold words and a final paycheck, Lily was utterly and completely isolated. The cruelty wasn't physical, at least not at first. It was a campaign of cold, calculated psychological warfare, a meticulous program of neglect designed to make Lily feel like a ghost in her own home. Victoria would spend hours preparing elaborate, fragrant meals for herself, a new hobby she'd taken up, and then leave a single, sad, prepackaged sandwich on the counter for Lily. The house that was once filled with the warmth of the fireplace and the sound of shared laughter became sterile, silent, and cold, its spaces filled only with the constant, mind-numbing hum of the television Victoria watched for hours on end. One day, Lily came home from school to find the wall where her father had hung his favorite hand tools completely bare. In their place hung a large, abstract painting Victoria had ordered online. When Lily asked where the tools were, Victoria waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, that old junk. I threw it out. It was cluttering up the place." Among that junk had been the small, child-sized hammer her father had given her. Lily had cried herself to sleep that night, clutching the empty space on her pillow. Lily, a resilient but heartbroken child, retreated into herself. Her only comfort, her only escape, was the forest her father had taught her to love. It was the last place that still felt like his. She'd spend hours on the familiar winding trails, her small boots crunching on fallen leaves, having one-sided conversations with the chattering squirrels and the silent, watchful deer. She would pretend her dad was walking just a few steps behind her, his presence a warm spot on her back, whispering the names of the trees as she passed them. Victoria watched these solitary excursions with a growing venomous irritation. Her late husband's will had been a major, infuriating disappointment. She had received a substantial chunk of money, yes, but the house, the rustic wooden prison she had come to despise, and a significant trust fund were left solely to Lily, to be managed by a dry, meticulous lawyer until she turned 21. Victoria was trapped, stuck in a house she hated, in a life she hadn't planned for, tethered to a quiet, sad-eyed child who stood directly between her and a genuine fortune. Then, the weather reports began to buzz with increasingly urgent warnings. Meteorologists spoke of a once-in-a-generation blizzard, a perfect storm of cold air and moisture barreling toward their region. Where everyone else saw danger, disruption, and a reason to hunker down, Victoria saw a golden, heaven-sent opportunity. A monstrous idea, cold and sharp, took root in the barren soil of her mind. An accident, she thought, the words crystallizing with perfect, terrible clarity. A tragic accident, A little girl, already known for wandering off into the woods alone, gets lost in a terrible historic storm. Who would ever question it? They'd call it a tragedy. They'd pity the poor, grieving stepmother. The thought sent a dark, electric thrill through her. She would be free. And as Lily's sole surviving guardian, she spent an evening online, confirming her suspicions. With Lily gone, the trust fund, that mountain of money, would revert to her. She immediately started laying the groundwork, her mind clicking with cold precision. She placed a call to the trust's lawyer, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. She casually mentioned how deeply worried she was about Lily's uncontrollable and reckless habit of running off into the woods for hours at a time. "I just don't know what to do with her," she sighed into the phone, adding a fake sob for effect. "She's so lost in her grief, she won't listen to reason. I'm terrified she's going to get hurt out there." The day before the storm was due to hit, Victoria's entire demeanor changed. She became sickeningly, unnaturally sweet. "How about we go for a special drive tomorrow, sweetie?" she said, her voice a syrupy imitation of affection that made the hairs on Lily's arms stand up. "Just us girls. We'll go get some ice cream." Lily, starved for any sliver of kindness, for a return to the way things used to be, looked up from the floor with wide, hopeful eyes. "Ice cream?" she whispered, the word tasting like a forgotten dream. "The very best kind," Victoria promised, her cold heart twisting with a dark, triumphant satisfaction. "The kind with all the sprinkles and hot fudge. We'll celebrate. New beginnings." The trap was set. The bait was taken. The next morning, the world outside was painted in shades of dread. The sky was a bruised, ominous gray, and the air held a biting, expectant stillness. Victoria bundled Lily into her warmest coat, a gesture that felt less like a mother's care and more like the impersonal handling of a package. "Ready for our little adventure?" she asked, her smile a brittle, bright slash of red lipstick. Lily nodded eagerly, her small heart fluttering with a fragile hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. They drove for a long, long time, far past the turnoff for the local ice cream shop. The familiar town gave way to highways, which then gave way to a winding, poorly maintained logging road that plunged deep into the heart of the national forest. The trees grew thicker, pressing in on the car, their branches clawing at the windows. The radio, which had been playing cheerful music, was now broadcasting a constant stream of emergency warnings about the approaching blizzard. Victoria hummed along, unfazed. "Where are we going, Victoria?" Lily finally asked, the old, familiar knot of unease tightening in her stomach. The promise of ice cream was beginning to feel thin and far away. "It's a shortcut," Victoria said smoothly, not taking her eyes off the road. "To a secret ice cream place. A special one. You'll love it." She turned up the radio, drowning out any further questions. The first snowflakes, large and wet, began to fall, splatting against the windshield like fat, white tears. The road grew rougher, more uneven. Finally, Victoria pulled the car over in a small, desolate clearing. The dense forest pressed in on all sides, creating a sense of profound isolation. There was nothing here. No buildings, no signs, nothing but trees and the rapidly whitening ground. "Okay." "Sweetie," Victoria said. Her voice suddenly flat, all the fake warmth gone, replaced by a chillingly brisk, businesslike tone. She switched off the car engine, and the sudden silence was deafening. "I need you to do me a big favor. I was out here yesterday, and I think I dropped my favorite earring. It's very expensive. Go look for it for me. Just over there by that big old pine tree." Lily looked out at the snow, which was already starting to stick, dusting the ground in a thin layer of white. "But it's snowing," she said in a small, uncertain voice. "The news said—" "It won't take a minute," Victoria snapped, her irritation finally showing, raw and ugly. "Now go on. I'll wait right here in the warm car. We can't go get our ice cream until you find it for me. Don't you want your ice cream?" The mention of ice cream was the key, the final turn of the screw. Hesitantly, Lily opened the car door and stepped out into the biting cold. A blast of wind immediately hit her face, stealing her breath. She trudged through the thin layer of snow toward the designated pine tree, her eyes scanning the ground for a telltale glint of gold she knew she would never find. When she looked back, Victoria gave her a small, tight wave. Lily turned back to her task, a surge of determination running through her. She wanted to be good. She wanted to find the earring. She wanted that ice cream. And more than anything, she wanted this cold, unpredictable woman to finally be happy with her. She searched for a minute, then two. The wind was picking up now, beginning to howl, whipping the snow into a frantic horizontal frenzy. It was getting hard to see more than a few feet in front of her. "I can't find it!" She yelled toward the car, her voice sounding small and weak against the rising gale. There was no answer, just the shriek of the wind through the pines. She turned around, shielding her eyes from the stinging snow. The car was gone. A deep, profound silence fell in the space where the engine's hum had been. The only sound was the monstrous, roaring voice of the wind. "Victoria?" she called out, her voice swallowed instantly by the storm. She took a few stumbling steps forward, her heart beginning to pound a frantic, terrified rhythm against her ribs. "Victoria!" Panic, sharp and colder than the snow, pierced through her fragile hope. She ran back to the exact spot where the car had been parked, her small boots slipping in the deepening snow. There were only tire tracks, 2 deep gouges in the snow, and even they were vanishing quickly under the relentless, furious onslaught from the sky. She was alone, utterly, completely alone. Her stepmother had lied. There was no secret ice cream place. There was no lost earring. There was only the endless, indifferent forest and the storm, which was now raging with a terrifying, all-consuming fury. The world had become a whirlwind of white, and at its center stood a 7-year-old girl, betrayed and abandoned to die. The world dissolved into a blinding, disorienting blur of white. The wind didn't just blow. It shrieked, a physical force that tore at Lily's coat, found its way through the seams, and stung her cheeks until they went numb. For a long moment, sheer primal terror paralyzed her. She stood frozen in the middle of the clearing, tears welling up and freezing on her eyelashes, Victoria's name a silent, choked scream in her mind. She had been left. Abandoned. A piece of trash thrown from a car. Then, from the depths of her memory, another voice surfaced. A voice that was warm, steady, and full of love. "When you're lost, Lilybug, don't panic. Panic is the enemy. It makes you run in circles. First thing always is you find shelter." It was her father. The memory was so clear, from a time they had been caught in a sudden summer downpour. It was as if he were standing right beside her. That voice, that memory, was a single precious spark in the overwhelming cold. He wouldn't panic, so she wouldn't either. Her eyes, wide with fear, darted around the clearing. Shelter. He'd taught her that the best natural shelter in a snowstorm was under a big evergreen, a tree well where the branches keep the worst of the snow away. She spotted a dense cluster of ancient pine trees, their low-hanging branches heavy with snow, creating a dark, cave-like space beneath them. Shelter, pushing through the snow, which was already past her knees and getting deeper by the second, was grueling, exhausting work. Each step was a battle. By the time she finally crawled under the protective canopy of the pines, she was gasping for air, her small lungs burning. The wind was muffled here, reduced to a low moan, but the cold was a relentless physical presence. The shivering started, at first just a tremble, but it quickly escalated into violent, uncontrollable spasms that shook her entire body. She hugged her knees tightly to her chest, trying to make herself as small as possible, just like her dad had taught her when they'd played hide-and-seek. She remembered another lesson. "Insulate," he had said. Using her mittened hands, she began scooping up the loose, dry snow under the tree and packing it around her, building a small wall to block the wind, a tiny igloo of desperation. Hours passed in a terrifying, frozen twilight. Daylight, already muted by the storm, faded into a gloomy, oppressive darkness. And the snow just kept falling. Lily's violent shivering started to lessen. A change she didn't understand was a dangerous sign. It was replaced by a creeping, insidious numbness. She couldn't feel her fingers or toes anymore. A deep, bone-weary tiredness settled over her, a seductive whisper telling her to just lie down, to just close her eyes and sleep. It would be so easy. The snow was so soft, like a pillow. Don't you ever fall asleep when you're this cold, Lilybug? Sleep is a trick. It lets the cold win. If you're cold, you have to keep moving. You have to make your own heat. Her father's voice again, a lifeline thrown across time. With a surge of will she didn't know she possessed, she forced her numb, clumsy fingers to move. She squeezed them into fists and released them over and over, the motion clumsy and slow. She stomped her feet, even though she couldn't feel the impact, just the dull thud traveling up her legs. She started to sing the alphabet song, the simple melody a charm against the darkness, her words slurring as her lips grew stiffer. Say. When she finished, she started again. She recited the names of the trees her father taught her: pine, oak, maple, birch. She thought about Blinky the owl and how he fought to fly again. She couldn't give up. She had to fight too. She had promised her dad. She had promised she would be a good girl. And good girls don't give up. Under the crushing weight of the snow and the suffocating dark, a 7-year-old girl fought for her life, armed with nothing but the echoes of her father's love. The blizzard hit Marcus Thorne's mountain retreat not like weather, but like a physical assault. The wind slammed against the triple-paned floor-to-ceiling windows with the force of a battering ram. Inside, a fire crackled in a massive stone hearth, a stark contrast to the elemental fury raging just inches away. His head of security, a calm, capable ex-military man named David, gave him the final evening update. Passes are completely closed, sir. We're fully cut off. The forecast says this could go on for another 48, maybe even 72 hours. All backup generators are online. Systems are green. We're as secure as a fortress. Marcus just nodded, his gaze fixed on the mesmerizing, terrifying dance of the snow outside. This was the solitude he had craved, the escape he'd needed. But it felt less like a sanctuary and more like a luxurious, high-tech prison. He paced the length of the vast living room, the restlessness he'd tried to escape now amplified by his confinement. He walked over to a bank of high-definition security monitors displaying feeds from various cameras positioned around the property's perimeter. Most were just a useless, hypnotic swirl of white. He was about to turn away to pour another scotch when something caught his eye. On a long-range thermal camera pointed toward the forest's edge, a flicker, a faint, inconsistent heat signature. It was probably just an animal, a deer or a coyote, huddled down for the storm. That was the logical explanation. But he couldn't shake a feeling of profound, gut-level unease. He manipulated the controls, zooming in, trying to enhance the image through the digital noise. For a split second, the atmospheric interference cleared, and the image sharpened. It wasn't the shape of a deer. It was smaller, curled in on itself. It looked almost human. Then it vanished, lost again in the digital snow. "David," Marcus called out, his voice sharp. "Come here. Look at this. Did you see that?" David came to his side, squinting at the screen where Marcus was pointing. "I saw a flicker, sir, yes. It's most likely wildlife getting semi-sheltered from the wind. The system throws false positives in these conditions all the time. The thermal contrast gets skewed by the wind and driven snow." "It looked like a person," Marcus insisted, his gut twisting into a knot. "A small one." "Sir, with all due respect," David said, his tone patient but firm, "no one could be out in this. Not on foot. Not in this terrain. They wouldn't last an hour. It has to be an animal or a sensor glitch. There's a near-zero probability of it being a person." David was right. Of course he was right. It was crazy to think otherwise. It was an illusion, a ghost on a screen, his grief painting shapes in the static. Going out there would be a genuine suicide mission, risking his own life and potentially David's, for what was almost certainly a faulty piece of data. Then he thought of Chloe, alone on that mountain 20 years ago. The rescue team had told him later that if they'd been alerted just 20 minutes earlier, they might have found her alive. He hadn't gone after her immediately. He had waited. He had finished his call. He had been logical. He had made the safe choice. And that choice had cost him everything. The guilt was a physical thing, a cold weight in his chest. He looked from the static on the screen to the raging, impossible storm outside. Every rational instinct, every ounce of self-preservation screamed at him to stay put, to listen to David, to wait it out. But the image of that small, fading heat signature was burned into his mind. What if it wasn't a glitch? What if David's near-zero probability was not zero? What if 20 years later the universe was giving him a test? A second chance, impossibly, horrifically disguised as a sensor glitch in a blizzard. "Get the high-powered snowmobile prepped," Marcus said, his voice quiet but leaving no room for argument. "The Viper, full tank, extra fuel, survival pack." David was aghast. "Sir, that is not advisable. We have no idea what's out there. The visibility is zero. You could drive off a ravine 10 feet from the trail and we'd never know. 20 years ago, I listened to a voice that told me to wait. That the risk was too high," Marcus said, his own voice low and intense. His eyes locked on David's. "I'm not making that mistake again. I'm going." The wind in the open bay of the utility garage was a solid wall of force, stealing the breath from his lungs as Marcus pulled on the heavy-duty thermal suit. "I'm coming with you, sir," David said, his face set, handing Marcus a helmet with an integrated comm system and thermal visor. "No," Marcus ordered, his tone absolute. "I need you here. You'll be my eyes. Monitor my position via the suit's GPS. If I'm not back in 90 minutes, or if you lose my signal for more than 10 consecutive minutes, you call for an emergency airlift. Use the iridium beacon. Tell them it's a life-or-death priority. Don't wait, David. Don't hesitate." David, seeing the unshakable resolve in his boss's eyes, a resolve forged in a 2-decade-old tragedy, gave a single, tight nod, flipping down the thermal visor of his helmet. Marcus gunned the engine of the powerful snowmobile, a custom-built machine more akin to a small tank, and plunged headfirst into the white chaos. The journey was a brutal, disorienting nightmare. The wind felt like a physical opponent, trying to rip him from the machine. Massive, unseen snowdrifts appeared out of nowhere, threatening to flip him. At one point, the ground beneath him simply vanished, and he launched into the air, landing with a bone-jarring crash on the other side of a snow-filled gully he never saw coming. He couldn't see the trail. He was driving blind, relying completely on the GPS overlay inside his visor and the flickering, unreliable thermal imaging. Doubt, cold and sharp, gnawed at him. "This is crazy. You're chasing a ghost. You're going to die out here for nothing." After 20 minutes that felt like an eternity, the GPS indicated he was in the target area. He slowed the powerful machine to a crawl, sweeping the thermal scope across the ghostly landscape. Nothing, just the cold, gray shapes of trees and the colder white of the snow. "Anything, sir?" David's voice crackled in his ear, tinny against the howl of the storm. "Negative," Marcus grunted, frustration and fear warring within him. He was about to admit defeat, to turn back, when he saw it. A faint, irregular patch of gray tucked under a thicket of pines. It was barely warmer than the snow around it, which meant whatever it was losing heat. Fast! He jumped off the machine, sinking into snow up to his thighs, and fought his way yard by grueling yard toward the trees. As he got closer, the shape became clearer. It was small. Curled into a tight ball, it was a child. He dropped to his knees in the snow and pushed aside the heavy, snow-laden branches. And there she was, a little girl, her face a pale, waxy blue, her lips gray. She was terrifyingly, unnaturally still. For one heart-stopping, gut-wrenching second, he thought he was too late. He had failed again. The same icy dread that had paralyzed him 20 years ago seized him now. He ripped off a thick thermal glove and pressed 2 trembling fingers to the side of her neck, under her jaw, praying to a god he hadn't spoken to in decades. He searched, nothing, then a flutter. Faint and thready like the beat of a bird's wing, but it was there. A pulse. She was alive. "David, I've got her," he said into his comm, his voice thick with a storm of emotion. "It's a child. A little girl. She's severely hypothermic, barely responsive." Gently, as if she were made of spun glass, he scooped her up. She was frighteningly light. He unzipped his own heavy parka, placed her against his chest, and zipped the coat up around her, a desperate, cocooning attempt to share his body heat. The journey back was a frantic, high-stakes race against time, one arm holding the child tight against him, the other hand fighting the handlebars. steering toward the single pinprick of light on the GPS that was his home. He kept talking to her, a steady low murmur against the fury of the storm. "It's okay. You're safe now. Just hold on. You just have to hold on." He wasn't just talking to her. He was talking to Chloe and to the ghost of his younger self, telling them all that this time, he wouldn't fail. The moment Marcus burst through the door, a human snowdrift with a precious, still burden, his staff was ready. David had mobilized them with military precision. They had a guest room prepared, the temperature turned up high, with an arsenal of warm blankets, medical supplies, and a large monitor already active, displaying a secure video link. "Call Dr. Evans. Now," Marcus ordered as he carried Lily directly to the warm room, not stopping to remove his own snow-caked gear. "Tell him it's a priority 1 emergency, severe hypothermia in a child, likely 7 or 8 years old. I need him on video conference." They worked with a quiet, focused efficiency, following the calm, remote guidance of Marcus's personal doctor from his office in Zurich. On the large screen, Dr. Evans guided them through the critical passive rewarming protocol. They gently cut away Lily's frozen wet clothes and wrapped her in pre-warmed blankets and a specialized thermal wrap from the retreat's extensive medical kit. As her core temperature slowly, painstakingly began to rise from a dangerously low number, she started to shiver again, the tremors growing more and more violent until her whole body convulsed. "That's a good sign," Dr. Evans's voice said from the screen, offering a sliver of reassurance. "It's paradoxical, but the shivering means her body's systems are starting to fight back. She's re-engaging." Marcus sat by her bedside for hours, refusing to leave, watching the slow, miraculous return of pink to her cheeks. He watched her breathe. He watched the steady rhythm on the heart monitor they had attached. Late into the night, long after the doctor had signed off and the staff had retreated, Lily's eyes finally fluttered open. They were wide and full of a deep, disoriented fear. "It's okay," Marcus said softly, leaning forward. "You're safe. My name is Marcus. You were caught in the storm." Tears immediately filled her eyes and spilled onto the pillow. "She left me," she whispered, her voice hoarse and raspy. "Victoria. She told me to find her earring." She drove away. The name, Victoria, landed in the quiet room with the force of a physical blow. A cold, sharp, unfamiliar anger rose in Marcus, so pure and potent it eclipsed his exhaustion and his relief. "Who is Victoria?" he asked gently, keeping his voice even, not wanting to frighten her further. In a halting, broken voice, punctuated by tears and shivers, Lily told him everything. She told him about her father, the house he built, and the happy times in the forest. She told him about Victoria's arrival, the cracked birdhouse, her father's sickness, and the promise she'd made to him. She told him about the lie, the ridiculous story about the ice cream and the lost earring, and the final, devastating image of the taillights disappearing into the snow. As he listened to this small child recount a story of unimaginable cruelty, Marcus felt something fundamental shift deep inside him. For 20 years, his anonymous charity had been a transaction, a way of balancing a ledger from his past. It was about easing his own guilt. But this was different. This small, brave girl with the haunted eyes wasn't a number on a spreadsheet or a faceless beneficiary of a foundation. She was real. Her pain was real. Later that night, Lily woke up screaming from a nightmare. Marcus rushed to her side, sitting on the edge of the bed until her frantic sobs subsided. He found himself telling her about the stars, explaining how far away they were, anything to distract her. In that moment, protecting her, avenging the wrong that had been done to her, became the single most important mission of his life. A powerful, unspoken bond, forged in the heart of a blizzard, had formed between the billionaire who had lost all hope and the little girl who had almost lost her life. The blizzard finally broke 2 days later, leaving behind a world transformed, buried under a thick, pristine blanket of white. While Lily slept, safe and warm and watched over by his trusted staff, Marcus put his immense, formidable resources to work. He didn't call the police. This was too personal. This required a different kind of justice. It took his team of private investigators, the best in the world, a discreet firm run by a former Mossad agent, less than 3 hours to find her. Victoria, it turned out, hadn't gone to the authorities. She hadn't been worried at all. She had checked into a 5-star ski resort, a haven of pampered luxury just 40 miles from where she had left a 7-year-old child to die. Transaction records showed she was paying for her opulent suite, her expensive spa treatments, and her celebratory champagne with Lily's father's credit card. Marcus took his helicopter. He didn't bother to call ahead. He landed at the resort's private helipad and walked directly into the lobby, his face a mask of cold fury that made the bustling, cheerful room fall silent as he passed. He got her suite number from the terrified manager and let himself in with a master key. Victoria was lounging on a plush sofa in a silk robe, a half-empty glass of champagne in her hand, watching a movie. She jumped, startled, as he entered. "Who in the world do you think you are?" she snapped, her voice sharp with indignation. "This is a private suite."
"Get out!"
"My name is Marcus Thorne," he said quietly, his voice dangerously calm as he switched off her television with the remote. "We need to talk about Lily." Victoria's face paled, the color draining away to match the snow outside. She forced a frantic, unconvincing smile, her mind scrambling. "Lily? Oh my God, Lily! The poor dear, I lost her. The storm, it came up so fast! I went to the authorities, of course. I've been so worried sick I haven't slept a wink." Marcus just stared at her, his silence more damning than any accusation. "You're a very, very bad liar." He pulled out his phone. First, he played the thermal camera footage, which his tech team had enhanced and clarified. The video was chillingly clear. It showed her car stopping, the small, bright heat signature of a child getting out, and then the car driving away, leaving the small signature alone and shrinking in the cold. Then he played the audio file of her call to the sheriff's office, a call she had made a full 6 hours after she had checked into the resort, a call full of fake hysterics and crocodile tears. "My stepdaughter. She's vanished," she'd wailed into the phone. The timestamp on the call was damning, the last vestige of color drained from her face. She looked like a ghost. "She's alive," Marcus said, his voice as cold and sharp as an icicle. "No thanks to you. You don't understand," Victoria stammered, her composure shattering, her mind racing for an escape route where there was none. "That girl, she was a burden. She was in the way of my future. She was a constant reminder of a life I never wanted. The house, the woods, him. I deserved more. Your future?" Marcus took a step closer, his presence seeming to suck all the air out of the room. "You left a 7-year-old child to freeze to death for money. You don't have a future. But because I want this to be over for Lily's sake, I'll give you a choice you don't deserve. Option 1, he said, laying a thick folder on the coffee table. You sign these documents. They are legally binding. In them, you relinquish all guardianship of Lily and forfeit any and all claims to her father's estate, now and forever. Then you will walk out of here with nothing but the clothes on your back, and you will disappear. If I ever see your face or hear your name anywhere near Lily again, I will use every resource at my disposal to destroy what little is left of your miserable life." Victoria stared at the folder, her mouth agape. "And option 2? She whispered, her voice trembling. "Option 2, Marcus said quietly, is I forward these files, the thermal imaging, the call logs, the credit card statements showing you sipping champagne while she was freezing, along with Lily's full medical report and her sworn videotape testimony to the district attorney. You'll be charged with attempted murder of a minor, child endangerment, and fraud. Given the evidence, you won't see the outside of a state prison for the next 20 years. The choice is yours. You have 10 seconds. With a choked sob that was more frustration than remorse, Victoria snatched the pen from the table. Her hand trembling with rage, she scrawled her name across the signature lines, her script barely legible. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and her expensive coat and fled the room as if the hounds of hell were at her heels, leaving the scent of her perfume and failure hanging in the air. Marcus watched her go, feeling not triumph but the cold, clean satisfaction of a debt settled and a great evil banished. When he returned to the retreat, he found Lily not in her bed but sitting by the crackling fire. a mug of hot chocolate cradled in her hands. She had a sketchbook open on her lap and was drawing a picture of a large tree with an impossibly grand treehouse nestled in its branches, complete with a tire swing. She looked small and fragile in the big armchair, but her eyes were clear. She looked up as he entered, offering a small, shy smile. He sat down in the chair across from her. "Victoria is gone," he said gently, choosing his words with immense care. "She won't ever bother you again, and everything that your father wanted you to have is safe." A small, tremulous smile touched Lily's lips. A genuine one this time.
Really?
"Really," he confirmed. He paused, the next words feeling more momentous than any business deal he'd ever closed, more terrifying than walking into the storm.
Lily,
"I know I'm a stranger, and this is all very new, and I can't ever replace your dad, but I've been alone for a very long time, and you've been through so much. I was thinking, maybe we could be alone together? I would be honored if you would consider staying here. With me, we could be a family. If you'd like." Lily looked at him, her gaze surprisingly serious and steady for a child of 7. She looked around the warm, beautiful room, at the dancing flames in the fireplace, and then back at the quiet, sad-eyed man who had walked into an impossible blizzard to save her. She saw the lingering sadness in his eyes, a sadness she recognized in her own heart from the loss of her dad. And beneath it she saw a deep, steady kindness. She saw safety. She saw a man who knew what it was like to be left behind in the snow. She didn't answer with words. She carefully set her sketchbook aside, slid off the enormous chair, walked over to him, and wrapped her small arms tightly around his neck. It was a hug that said everything. It was acceptance. It was trust. It was the beginning of a new life, a new beginning forged in the wreckage of the old one. Marcus held her close, a feeling of profound, unfamiliar peace settling over him for the first time in 20 years. The gaping hole in his heart left by Chloe's death would never fully heal, but for the very first time, it didn't feel empty. It was filled with a new, warm, and powerful purpose. He had risked everything to save a stranger in a storm, and in doing so, he had ended up saving the most important parts of himself. In the coldest of storms, survival is never just about battling the wind or the snow. It's about finding and holding on to the warmth of human compassion. A person's true worth isn't measured by what's in their bank account, by the empires they build, or the things they acquire. It's measured by what they are willing to give from their heart, by the risks they take for another, by their willingness to walk out into the storm when every rational voice says to stay inside. Greed and cruelty may build towering walls of ice, making us prisoners in our own lives, but a single, selfless act of kindness can be the fire that melts them all. And sometimes, a mission to save someone else ends with us finding the very parts of ourselves we thought were lost and buried forever in the snows of yesterday. We're so glad you stayed for this story. What would you have done in Marcus's position when he saw that flicker on the screen? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And for more stories that explore the depths of the human heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.